So implementing a new technology solution is always a challenge. And one of the first challenges you're going to face is just getting it approved. And I know I've spoken to many readers and including a lot of folks in this group who have talked about that challenge. As that clinical operations executive, you might know that you need this new technology, whether it's RBM or a study startup solution or ETMF or eConsent, whatever it happens to be. But the fact that you know that doesn't make it that much easier to get the folks above you to agree with you and to write a check for it. So if that's the first challenge, how do we go about doing that? And are there specific metrics or things that you would present to a manager to say, this is why we need to move forward?
Well, I mean, I think the biggest argument is quality matters. And you know, it may not be a big cost savings. In fact, you may be spending more to implement a quality approach up front, but at the end of the day, if your data isn't, you know, what it should be, then you know you're going to pay for that, you know, maybe at a time you don't want to. So, you know, I've heard a lot of cost arguments. I mentioned in the study that I worked on, it was a very large study. There were some significant cost savings that were promised. Those did not come to fruition. We didn't shave 50% of the cost of monitoring. I think realistically, you can reduce the cost of on-site monitoring using central monitoring and a risk-based approach. I think it's more in an order of magnitude of, you know, 10%, and that may not, that may or may not be more or less than what you've paid, for instance, to implement it with a vendor. So, you know, the argument really is, you know, we need to comply with this regulation in the event that we want to submit this data for a claim. It has to hold up. And if we don't have confidence in the quality, then, you know, we really can't, you know, we don't stand behind it. So the arguments I would make, and everybody's going to know their organization best, you know, is your organization driven by time? So if it is, then I think it makes a ton of sense to, you know, make the argument that if we're looking at this in a routine basis, we are staying on top of the data, we're going to be able to lock our database, you know, way faster than we normally do, because we have a system in place and we're on top of things, and we're not worried about the things that really are not impacting the overall quality of the study. We de-emphasize the pieces that are, you know, meaningless in the overall scheme of the study, in favor of having an understanding, having confidence in our primary endpoints, having confidence in, you know, the overall quality of the data. So we're going to, you know, so that's one argument for speed. Some organizations are very quality focused, and I think those are the kinds of organizations where you know, implementing something like this is probably easiest. And then the cost argument is frankly probably a little weaker, but I think one benefit of, you know, having a more centralized approach is that you can share that data a little bit faster and have a little bit more confidence in what it is in real time. And I think, you know, companies, especially small companies, are very interested in getting data as early as possible and as quickly as possible.
Okay, and other than getting it, the funding for it, are there other challenges there that companies will generally face in implementing the solution?
Absolutely, and I think it's interesting. I think that you have just as many challenges on your team as you do, you know, trying to convince people to, you know, actually implement this and pay for it. And what I mean by that is, most of us have the background with 100% source data verification. So when we say all of a sudden we're not going to do things the way we've always done them, we're going to take a totally different approach. What you get is resistance. And, you know, even to the point where I've seen you take your your monitoring plan and you reconfigure it. So you say you're going to source verify 100% of this, and you're going to source verify, maybe 20% of the less important points. And when you look at your metrics, what you find is people are still doing 100% source verification, and it's very, very hard to let go. And I sympathize with that because, if you're a monitor and you're going on site and you're making, your job is to make sure that the data is what the site says it is. It's very hard to say, well, I'm going to look at these fields and I'm just not going to look at these fields and leave the site. I think, you do find that sites, that CRAs are still going out and doing 100% source data verification, even when, it's not prescribed. So it's just a process. It's changing hearts and minds. It's making sure that the value proposition of implementing a change like this is clear to all team members, above you, below you. Everybody needs to be on board, and that just takes, really, I think as, clinical leaders, everybody here really needs to champion this and make sure that, the organization understands this is, it's not voluntary, it's mandatory, we have to do it. But then really make the case for why. And then if you can, start it by dipping your toe in and sort of see if the organization can kind of see how there have been some benefits, I think from there you have an easier time.